Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Akshat Mehri, and I am currently a research assistant at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. It is a matter of great pleasure to extend a warm and humble welcome to all to another edition of the ICS's weekly Wednesday seminar. Today's seminar is titled Japan's Energy and Climate Change Policy Challenges since 2011, an Assessment. Energy security and policies have been a matter of major concern among Japanese policymakers, largely due to the nation's resource limitations and its energy reliance on other nations. This aligns with Japan's commitment to climate conscious policies as well. After the Fukushima disaster in 2011, the deficit in electric power was met by a reliance on fossil fuels. Since then, a higher share of renewables has reduced the carbon intensity of the power sector. The twin challenges of reducing its fossil fuel dependence and ensuring the stability of its energy supply priorities gained importance after the signing of the Paris Agreement. Japan's strategic energy plan focuses on renewables in the medium and long terms and determines the nuclear policy after Fukushima, aiming at an optimal combination of energy sources by 2030. Today's seminar shall explore these strategic plans and the latest interim adjustment, which reveal a few uncertainties. It will also delve into Japan's decision to restart and rebuild its reactor fleet, exploring the factors that have necessitated these changes and the challenges in maintaining both domestic and international commitments. The speaker for today's session is Mr. Peter Joy Hudson. He has recently defended his PhD thesis, which focused on the political economy of the Japanese nuclear energy sector at the Department of East Asian Studies, the University of Delhi. Currently, he is a researcher at the Institute of Global International Relations, Tokyo. He is also a former research associate and program coordinator at the ICS. Today's session shall be chaired by Dr. Shamshad Ahmed Khan, who is a visiting associate fellow at the ICS and assistant professor of international relations at BITS Pilani, Dubai campus. Presently, he is in Tokyo as a visiting scholar at the Waseda Institute of Advanced Studies, Waseda University. He has been affiliated with prominent Indian and Japanese research institutions as well. He has also authored a book titled Changing Dynamics of India-Japan Relations, Buddhism to Strategic Partnership, published by Pentagon Press in 2017. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all the participants to please follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the presentation. Questions can be posted in the chat box. Please also include your name and affiliation when you post your questions. Alternatively, you may also use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. I shall now hand over to the chair. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Akshat, for inviting me and giving a brief introduction to each of us. And we are glad to have today Peter J. Hudson, who would speak on Japan's climate change policy with respect to its new energy policy. So we are in a world where too much emphasis is on the carbon neutrality and net zero terminology has emerged. So it is affecting every one of us. Considering that Japan has been champion on focusing on this, the advocating for the carbon neutrality ever since they launched Kyoto Protocol. And as of now, they are trying to diversify their energy policy. So this would be a good topic for us to understand what is going on in Japan's policy, energy policy, and its policy to mitigate the climate change. I would not take much time. I will hand over the mic to Peter, whose introduction has been given by Akshat. So Peter, floor is yours. Please start your presentation.
Thank you, Shamshad, and thank you the other ICS staff who had introduced me. My presentation today is looking at Japan's energy and climate change policy challenges since 2011, It's an assessment of the last decade and a couple of years. That's what was happening in Japan's energy scenario and climate change policy. The changes that has been happening over there. Can you see my slide?
Not yet. Yeah. Could you share the slide, please?
Oh, really? Okay.
Just quickly on the share screen option now.
So we just did it, right? In the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can see. It's visible. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
Yeah. So let me go straight away. I mean, so the questions that I'll be looking at is in post-Fukushima Japan, the status of the nuclear energy industry now. Is there a thrust towards renewables in Japan, looking at the basic energy plans post 311? Is Japan's energy policy attuned towards achieving its greenhouse gas reduction targets? War in Ukraine and its implications in the energy sector in Japan? What's the public opinion towards furthering nuclear energy in Japan? And I'll be looking at the current situation. What are the current latest policies which have been, which the Japanese government had come out recently? And this is just a brief preview of the presentation. So if you look at the climate change, the background of the primary, the first slide is about the background. I mean, it looks at the Japan's primary energy supply before 311. Let me minimize some of these windows. Yeah, it's blocking my view. Yeah. So if you look at Japan's primary energy supply before 2011, just in the year 2010, nuclear was around 11%. The fossil fuel dependency was around 82%, around 81%. And this nuclear was around 54 reactors were there in Japan. This is including the Fukushima Daiichi reactors. And on electricity generation, then the percentage reliance on nuclear was around 27%. And also there was plans to increase the nuclear fleet further to take up to 50% of the electricity generation by 2020, and by 53% by another 2030. So towards this, there was a plan to construct around 10 to 13 more nuclear reactors, and 9 of these were supposed to be completed by 2017. So this is the post-Fukushima timeline as to what was happening. This is just to give a background as to what was happening. So just before the 311, as I said, in June, just a sec, let me. Oh, it's blocking. Yeah, so just before 311 in June 2010, the Basic Energy Plan, which was released by the DPJ administration under Prime Minister Naoto Kan, favored renewable energy, but also emphasized on the relevance of nuclear power. And post-Fukushima disaster by May 2011, all the nuclear reactors were shut down one by one, and Japan's greenhouse gas reduction targets were also frozen. And by 2012, DPJ, the Prime Minister Naoto Kan, he had announced a nuclear phase out by 2030. So this deficit in nuclear, the power supply was also overcome by giving more, or rather running more thermal power stations, which obviously increase the dependence, or rather the consumption of coal and LNG in Japan. And following which the carbon intensity of the electricity also peaked by the year 2013. And since then it is going down. So it peaked in 2013, and then by 2012 December, our Prime Minister Abe won the elections, and he announced the restarts of the reactors by 2013. And following which, the Paris Climate Change Agreement also was signed, and wherein the first time it was a legally binding greenhouse gas reduction commitments were agreed by the member states. Screen is stuck. So if you look at the international scenario, there was an international consensus towards the need for drastic changes in energy production, keeping climate change realities post then. So after the climate change, Paris climate change agreement was signed in 2015, by 2018, the IPCC came out with a global warming 1.5 degrees centigrade, and it was a special report, and which stated that it is likely that the warming will exceed 1.5 degrees centigrade in the 21st century. And to avoid this, greenhouse gas emissions needs to be approximately halved from 2019 levels between 2030 between 2030 and 2035, the years. And before approaching net zero emissions by 2050. So they have to be the imminent danger of going ahead with a high greenhouse gas emissions was highlighted in this particular report again. And in 2020, the 30th anniversary edition of the UNDP report, the Human Development Report, also highlighted the problems of over dependence on energy. And the report for the first time emphasized the two key drivers which affect our ecology, which is material consumption and carbon footprints, which go hand in hand. And since the more you extract and consume resources, the more will be its impact on our ecosystems. And in 2020, again, the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook 2020 also emphasized the centrality of the energy production in rising carbon emissions. This is just to highlight what was happening after 2015. And in the G7 summit in Cornwall in 2021, it was highlighted that the coal power generation is the biggest cause of greenhouse gas emissions. And it was also agreed upon also to limit the temperature increase to keep the temperature global warming temperature by 1.5 degrees. And the same summit also called for the phasing out of coal power plants, which are not slated for emission reduction measures. And recently, in May 2023, in the G7 Hiroshima summit, the summit reiterated the urgency to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2030 and 60% by 2035, comparing to the 2019 levels. So there is a stepping up of the pressure to reduce greenhouse gas from the international agencies. So if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions in Japan, if you look at the right side of the slide, you can see that around 40%, more than 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions is coming from the energy sector alone. In the sense, from the emissions which are coming out with the conversion of energy, rather production of energy. And if you look at Japan's the second number is from the industry sector, and the third by the transport sector. So this again highlights the energy sector is a key sector from which the most greenhouse gas emissions are coming in Japan. And if you look at Japan's policies towards decarbonizing its economy, soon after the Paris Agreement, again in 2017 December, the first national hydrogen strategy was formed in Japan. It's called the Basic Hydrogen Strategy, and it introduces hydrogen and ammonia as an energy source to decarbonize its economy by leveraging hydrogen energy in transportation, industry, and power generation sectors. And this policy was again revamped in 2023. And a roadmap was also brought in as to how this the introduction of hydrogen and ammonia is to be brought in Japan. And in October 2020, Prime Minister Suga announced that by 2050, Japan will achieve an economy-wide greenhouse gas net zero. To achieve this, renewables, nuclear, and hydrogen and ammonia co-firing was to be accelerated in Japan. And in December 2020, a green growth strategy was announced, targeting the 14 sectors for government support. In this, wind, geothermal, and was to be accelerated, and hydrogen and ammonia also was to be further more investments were to be put in this the development of these technologies. In 2021, again, Prime Minister Suga announced that Japan will cut greenhouse gas emissions by 46% below 2013 levels by 2030. And further, in 2023, just last December, Prime Minister Kishida announced the Green X Transformation Basic Policy. With all these policies, Japan is trying to reduce the carbon intensity in its economy. And if you look at Japan's energy policy framework, the ministries involved are the ANRE, which is under the METI, which is the Ministry of Economy and Trade and Industry, and the climate change policies are mostly done by the Ministry of Environment. And if you look at the Japanese energy policy, since 2002, Japanese government has been coming on with basic energy plans. So every 3 years, a plan will be formulated, and this should be approved by the cabinet. And this forms the legal basis for the government to undertake measures on energy supply and demand. So in 2003, the first basic energy plan was released. And if you look at the plans which were further released over the years, now 6 plans have been released, but they call it by different names each time. Like some is, it's the first one is the basic energy plan, and then the new national energy plan. And in the second plan, you can see that the nuclear was given more importance, and a nuclear state was to be was projected in the 2006 plan. And in the third basic energy plan, which was released just before Fukushima, again nuclear energy was highlighted, and 53%. It was supposed to be reaching 53% by 2030. And as I said earlier, 7 new nuclear power plants were to be built by 2017. So further, again, the nuclear was highlighted in these first 3 plans. And after the Fukushima disaster, the 4th plan, which was come out in 2014, though it did not highlight the stoppage of nuclear energy at that particular point of time, because there was a lot of debate going on in the country. It still further placed nuclear energy to be up to 22% by 2030. And in the 5th strategic energy plan by 2018, the wordings changed, and it started highlighting nuclear again, and it started putting the word as base load power source. So nuclear was getting prominence again. And in 6th energy plan, this continued further. If you look at the Japan's power generation mix currently, nuclear over the years, in the last 10 years, it has been restarted since 2012, and now the percentage has reached around 6%. And the renewable sector over the years have reached now 22.4%. Before Fukushima, it was just a mere less than 5%. So over the years, there has been a sizable uptake as far as renewables are concerned. And to that, mostly the increments are from solar photovoltaics. And now there is more emphasis given for offshore wind. You can also see that fossil fuel also had come down slightly in the last 10 years. It was early 80%. Now it is around 70%. And there was an increase in coal consumption after the stoppage of all the reactors. As I said earlier, the deficit was being taken over by coal and LNG. But then, since then, it has reduced a little bit. And if you look at the renewable share in the power generation mix, there is an yearly increase, as I said earlier. Now the renewables is touching around 22%, and this bulk is coming from the solar PV, and there is a slight increase in the biomass sector as well, mostly coming from wood incinerations. This is also as per the climate change commitments. Wood also could be considered in the biomass sector. And offshore wind energy also has been emphasis in Japan recently, and there is sufficient. There is more projects which are coming up in Akita Prefecture, and all of these offshore projects in Chiba and Kyushu Prefecture. And if you look at the solar photovoltaics, in 2003, the first time a renewable portfolio standard was instituted in Japan, wherein renewable energy was, the power generation companies were asked to increase the renewable energy portfolio, and an incentive was given over the years. So this started in 2003, and then the feed-in tariff system for solar PV also was was introduced in 2009, and it was given as a full status by 2012. And this has in fact given the solar photovoltaic industry a big leap in Japan. From 2012 onwards, it's been coming up, and so within the renewable sector, solar PV is having the most growth. You can see that the average annual growth is around 22% over the years. As I said, offshore wind is the one which is getting more emphasis in the last 3 years, and a new act on promoting utilization of sea areas for renewable energy generation was enacted in April 2019, and an offshore wind vision also was announced in 2020. And from then on, 1 gigawatts of electricity generation is to be produced from offshore wind energy every year. And by 2030, this is to be reaching 10 gigawatts. And by 2040, 30 to 45 gigawatts. Towards this, floating offshore wind turbines, port and harbor development, and power grid development are also being planned in Japan. And the offshore regions are all auctioned, and in the first auction, which was done in 2021, the 1.7 gigawatts were awarded to a consortium by Mitsubishi in the offshore areas of Akita and Chiba prefectures. But as of 2022, the capacity stands just less than 1 gigawatt. So it is falling short of the target which the Japanese government has kept for itself. If you look at the geothermal energy scenario, Japan is the third largest potential. Japan has got third largest potential for geothermal energy in Japan. As you know, the place is abundant with hot springs and volcanoes. So development of geothermal energy sources was added to Japan's JOGMEC, it is called. It's a unit within the MNT, and since then, since 2012 onwards, there is emphasis is given to the development of geothermal resources. And right now, in the last 3 years, 3 major onsen areas, hot spring areas, had been selected for development of geothermal energy in Japan. Again, as I said earlier, the 6th strategic energy plan, which is released in 2021, this is the third one which is released after Fukushima. You can see that the nuclear sector, the one which is in the middle, the beam in the middle, you can see that 20 to 22% of the is to be made up from nuclear, and by fossil fuels, it is to be reduced by 41% by 2030. And to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 46% in the financial year 2030, and compared to the financial year 2013 levels. So if you remember earlier, I said that in 2013 the carbon intensity of the economy peaked because of the stoppage of the reactors. And this was again, the deficit was filled up by coal and LNG. So since then, the carbon intensity has peaked in 2013, and the Japanese government has kept that as the benchmark here for the greenhouse gas emission reductions. Again, at the 6th strategic plan, the maximum importance was given to renewable energy, these are again changes which has happened over the years. Earlier, the emphasis was not much on was given to renewable energy, but now it's been slowly going up. Now, if you look at the constraints in developing renewable energy in Japan, power grid constraints in transmission of electricity to the demand centers is a major problem. You know, the renewable energy centers are mostly, the sources are mostly located in the northern region, or else in the southern region, in the western region, wherein Kyushu is known for more solar PV installations, and the demand centers are mostly in the Kansai region, in the center of Japan. So it's very difficult to transmit electricity from the north as well as from the west to the central regions of Japan. And there is this issue of the change of frequency of the lines. In the northern region, it's a different frequency, and in the southern regions, it's a different. So you have to convert or interchange these frequencies to pass to these centers. So that is also one constraint. And nuclear reactor restarts and output controls of solar PV outputs. So, for example, in Kyushu region, as I said, the solar PV installations are much higher. And when the Sendai reactor there in Kyushu was about to be restarted, or rather when it was running, the output from the solar PVs were at a higher, and it could not, the grid could not accept the excess power which is being generated from the PVs, the solar PVs, because already the Sendai reactor was up and running. So there was the government had to curtail the intake of electricity from solar PVs. So there was excess. There was a wastage of 5 to 9% of electricity from solar PVs. This is in 2019. So such similar problems are there in the other regions as well. So the excess generation from solar PV is there on the one hand, but then once the reactors are getting restarted, there is an excess energy which cannot be taken onto the system. Then other problem is about the capital intensity nature of the projects. Of course, geothermal, and it's a nascent technology, in fact, though Japan has got the technology it's promoting geothermal projects elsewhere, but not much in Japan. So in the last 2-3 years, again, 3 geothermal projects have been taken up. All the other projects are all happening internationally in Indonesia and in the US. But yet, where Japan is a leader in this technology, Japan is not yet much invested its projects here in Japan. And again, there is an increased resistance by local communities, where large they call it mega solar PV fields are being erected, and geothermal plants are mostly located in hot spring regions, because of the intake of the hot water as well as the hot vapor, which is used to hot water vapor to use to run the plant. There is quality of the water is going down as in many of the regions where such plants are being planned. So there, and of course, there are other environmental issues attached to it. Like, for example, in the 2 years back, there was this huge landslide in a particular region in central Japan, and this was caused by high rain output. But then this on top of that, it was a mountain region, and on top of it, there was a huge mega solar plant. So there was no enough trees to hold the water, and that was cited as one of the reason for such landslide. And around 26 to 30 people died, if I may remember rightly. And there was a huge protest by the community there. The coal generation again post the Fukushima the disaster again, when the nuclear reactors were stopped, there was another additional 50 coal power plants which were also planned to be begun, because they had to switch to other fossil fuels to run the thermal power stations. So mostly coal, and then LNG were the sources to be from which thermal power plants were to be run. And currently in Japan there are around 150 odd coal power plants, and many of them are old, and some are to be shut down. But then there is, after the the war in Ukraine, because of the price increases and the shortage of LNG, many of the power plants which was earlier slated for stoppage are now being revamped. This is again to show the the supply restrictions in power sector here in Japan, and you can also see the price rises. How the red mark shows the price hikes as far as LNG is concerned. But if you compare with other regions of the world, Japan, for example, Germany had around 10% doubling of its LNG rates, but then Japan, this was not the case, though there was an increase, but the increase is not that as severe as what has happened in Germany. The reason being, Japan is using its own sources mostly from Russia and Indonesia for sourcing its LNG. So the price hike has not affected that much in Japan as what has happened in Germany. And if you look at the reactors now, when Fukushima happened, all the reactors were stopped, but then one by one the reactors are being restarted, and from 2015 onwards, and they have restarted 12 reactors. The latest was just opened just last month here, and all of these reactors are restarted with the approval of the Nuclear Regulatory Authority, which was revamped post Fukushima. And these reactors have to be going through a rigorous tests, and terrorism-related checks have to be incorporated, which is costing quite a burden for the government here. But still, they are bent on starting the reactors. Now, out of the 54 reactors earlier, now only 12 are running, and many of them are to be decommissioned. And if you look at the political parties, what are they thinking about restarts? So let me begin with this LDP, the current ruling party, which has come out with a statement saying that maximum utilization of nuclear energy and after ensuring its safety. This is their stated position as of now. And the second, the Kumeto, the second partner, it aims at reduction of the imports of fossil fuels and to minimize its imports in the long run. And it also contradictingly says that to reduce dependence on nuclear energy, to realize a nuclear-free society in the future. But then yet these two parties are in coalition. If you look at the other main opposition parties, let me touch upon this Constitutional Democratic Party. It is the one which is very prominent in reducing Japan's reliance on nuclear energy. So it says 100% of renewables and not to rely on fossil fuels and nuclear energy, and not to support new builds in the nuclear sector. All the rest of the parties are having mixed reactions on this. And if you look at the public opinion, this is more very interesting in the sense that let me go to this slide. Yeah, so nuclear power, whether it was necessary or not, this was a survey which was done in November 2010. In that, a sizable percentage, around 87.4% of the people had said yes to that. And over the years, after the Fukushima particularly, the no voices have gained. And by 2020, if you look at the percentage, it is around 56.4%. But then you can also look at the chart, which is showing the the public opinion from 2013 to 2021. In fact, 2023, you can see that the yes voices are increasing. The yes or the support voices it's marked in blue. So in this again shows the range between the public opinion has moved. Earlier during the post Fukushima, there was a greater no. Most people were against it, and now there is a slight uptake as far as the yes voices. And this is again the reason being, as cited by most researchers, is that about the positive attitude towards nuclear because of the recent shortages in the power supply here in Japan, as well as the price increases as far as domestic domestic electricity rates are concerned. So people are mostly moving towards yes, towards nuclear restarts, and this has also reflected in the recent policy decisions which the Japanese government has made. And if you look at the in 2022, there was the first time when the Japanese government had come out very emphatically towards furthering or even restarting the stalled nuclear construction, nuclear power plants was in 2022. Until then, the Japanese government had been talking about saying that they were not very emphatically saying that what was their policy towards nuclear. And so in 2022, Kishida came out with a Green Transformation Conference. In that conference, he exhorted the concerned departments to start enacting laws, policies by the year end. And by the December of this last year, the GX Green Transformation Policy roadmap was finalized. And but then the last year, even before this policy was done, the Japanese government was already in conversation with the Terra Power, a company which is floated by Bill Gates, which is promoting small and modular reactors in the US. So there is now a tie-up between the Japanese companies and the Terra Power to build new nuclear power plants. The SMR, that is the small and modular reactors here in Japan, and together with that, the existing nuclear reactors which were earlier given a maximum 40 years life soon after the disaster, was now given another 20 years. I mean, the extension for another 60 more years had been given, and this can all be done by the clearance of the Nuclear Regular Authority. And after the first 30 years of its operation and every 10 years subsequently, the reactor or the electricity company has to go for the approval from the NRA. So that's the stand as far as the nuclear reactor rebuild and restarts is concerned. As far as nuclear technology exports are concerned, the lot of developments are happening, especially with the existing technology which Japan had possessed earlier with regard to the high temperature engineering test reactor. This was an Owari-machi in Ibaraki Prefecture. This was actually stopped earlier over various reasons, but then this has been revived now, and by 2020, the Japanese Atomic Energy Agency has agreed with the National Nuclear Laboratory in UK to jointly develop this technology again. And again, if you look at the GX transformation the roadmap which is developed which the Kishida government has come out recently, it talks about simultaneous realization of a stable supply of energy and economic growth and decarbonization. And towards this, this is an ambitious project. So a huge amount of capital is required, and this is being sought from public and private partnerships over the year. Like 150 trillion yen is to be generated, and a pro-growth further a pro-growth carbon pricing system is also slated to be announced. But then just in last April onwards, they have come out with a pilot project for this carbon pricing here in Japan, and by 2026 this is to be fully implemented. And as far as the furtherance of this plan, emission trading system, a full-scale one is to be planned by 2026, and emission surcharges and emission allowance to be imposed on companies which are altering on the greenhouse gas emission targets. So to conclude, I would say that the Japanese energy situation is currently going through a transition post 3/11 disasters. This transition is in tandem with the global narratives around decarbonization and moving towards a carbon neutral economy. And reducing greenhouse gas emission targets are off the mark currently due to the economic recovery after the pandemic. And renewables, especially solar PV, had increased substantially, and currently the growth is slowing down. Offshore wind power to increase in the long run as new projects are being initiated. And then hydrogen and ammonia co-firing projects are yet to take off. There is considerable opposition from the other countries in the world, especially the G7 communique recently has omitted this particular item. Japan is the sole leader, or rather, Japan is a pioneer in this, but then this is not yet to be implemented here in Japan itself. So the projects are coming up. But with some restarts of nuclear reactors, the life extensions of the existing reactors, nuclear energy is slated to continue to be a major source of power in the medium to long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for giving us a very comprehensive background of emergence of Japan's energy policy post Fukushima crisis, as well as the dilemma that it faces in decarbonization and meeting the requirement of Japanese energy, and the dilemma that how to decarbonize and as well as at the same time provide electricity to its industry and households. Before I open the floor, there are 2-3 points which I wanted to highlight. As you know, this is I'm also from the Japanese studies, and this is the area which I have been following since Fukushima crisis. So when Japan wanted to before 2011, Japan wanted to surpass France, which is the number one country to produce electricity from the nuclear sources. But because of Fukushima crisis, the plan to surpass France was watered down, and there had been enough domestic oppositions within Japan because they realized that the nuclear village, the people who are in part of this nuclear industry, the scientists, the METI, and the those who are producers, TEPCO and KEPCO etc., they did not tell the truth. They sold the truth that the reactors are foolproof. They are it will not cause any disaster. But when the Fukushima crisis happened, they had to rework entire energy mix. And you rightly pointed out that it was Naoto Kan who decided to go nuclear zero. So he decided to phase out nuclear energy generation plan. However, his successor, Yoshiko Noda, I remember one of his foreign policy, one of his policy speeches, where he mentioned that the nuclear energy is lifeblood of Japan. So he said that he would, instead of phasing out the reactors, which were already shut down because of the inspections that were going on, he said that he would restart. So in your slide, you have mentioned, or in your presentation, you have mentioned that it is Shinzo Abe who said that he will restart. However, the process of uh, relying on nuclear energy started from the Noda period onward. So the DPG itself shelved the idea of, or Yoshiko Noda shelved the idea of his predecessor that Japan will go nuclear reactor free. So this is one point, and you are right. After that, what it was realized that Japan has lots of other renewable sources, including geothermal, wind, and uh, the basically geothermal and the wind, which Japan is not utilizing or underutilizing, because there's a lobby within the METI which wants to promote nuclear reactor, also because it wants to sell these reactors abroad. So that was the reason that photovoltaic, the thermal and geothermal was, sorry, photovoltaic and wind and geothermal were ignored. So post 311, Japan included so many other renewable sources in its energy mix, and they are heavily investing in that area. Feed-in tariff, you are rightly pointing out, it is because of the lobby that they never thought the photovoltaics were being used in a standalone the houses. They were consuming, they were producing and consuming the surplus electricity if a household was there, because there was no feed-in tariff system. So they were it is underutilized. So post Fukushima, of course, lots of players came out, which, and with this feed-in system, the other sources of energy were also utilized. 2-3 things I wanted to, I was, I thought you should have highlighted. A, the tension between the people who are opposed. You are aware that on each Friday there were a group of people who used to visit Prime Minister House, and they used to chant slogan, and it continued. I think when this time I did not go there, but 2019 when I came, the number where it was number were shrinking, but people were still going outside the Prime Minister House each Friday, and these were the people who wanted to get rid of nuclear reactors. So I want to know what is the response. Of course, one of the public opinion you have shown here, which shows that the support is growing again in favor of usage of nuclear reactor or nuclear power. But what about those people who, there's one nuclear village and there's nuclear allergic village? How they are responding to the emerging policy that did not come out that prominently in your presentation? And what is like whenever of course, as you pointed out, that Japan has a policy to go carbon neutral, and they announced this policy much before the Paris climate change treaty was come into force, 2016. So they have external vulnerabilities. One, of course, is March 11, 2011, when they had to shut down the nuclear reactor and they had to shift to other sources of energy, and that watered down their plan to go carbon neutral. And then the second one is the present oil shock, or you can say present Ukraine crisis, where Japan has to reduce its dependence on LNG and other sources of. So how Japan is balancing the two to go carbon neutral, and again these external vulnerability, how Japan is trying to challenge this thing did not come to the fore, and whether these three sources that you have highlighted would be sufficient enough to meet the growing energy demand in Japan. Those questions I think you should ponder and respond to in the Q&A session. So Akshat, you can take over in case there is some question from the floor.
Certainly, sir. So we have one question in the chat box from Farah. She is a research intern at the ICS. So she asks if the speaker could elaborate on the significant changes in Japan's energy mix before and after the Fukushima disaster in 2011, particularly in terms of nuclear power and fossil fuel dependency. Further, she states that the speaker also mentioned Japan's reliance on coal and LNG after the Fukushima disaster. How has the recent shift in global energy prices and supply affected Japan's energy policies and goals?
Yeah. So let me respond to Shamshad's point about the public opinion. When I had mentioned that how the public opinion was swaying over the last 10 to 12 years, but then the particular incident that the protest movement which is happening before the prime minister's residence, and it's also the Japanese diet is also in the same locality. So in fact, even I was also curious as to what was happening before. This was the same protest movement which had a big number of people protesting until around 2012-13. There was probably this was one of the mass protest movements which had happened in Japan post the war. I mean, not the 1960s, but in the last say 10 to 20, 30 years. But then, if you look at the numbers now, he was quite correct to say that by 2019, I guess he said like there were still people around, and if you look at now, hardly 4, 5, at times if there's a rain, nobody will turn up, So this was just, I guess, the initial fervor towards, stopping this, the entire nuclear fleet and all, that sort of had stopped, and then recently, especially with the Ukraine war, and as I said in the presentation as well, the price hikes, especially the domestic energy prices, have made the people to think twice about saying no to nuclear. So I guess it's all a reflection of this, and plus, of course, by the 10 to 12 years, this inertia would have set in with this people who are protesting, and if you look at the protesters, it's like all were like kind of, I mean, at least the ones which I saw towards the last 2-3 years was mostly old people, and they are connected to some kind of religious sect, so they are just fervently coming just for their camaraderie maybe, So what I want to say is that over the years it has waned. You're correct, but then this is also reflecting in the overall public opinion towards it, how things have changed over the years. Regarding the nuclear village, of course, the nuclear village, that issue is still there. I mean, they were the ones who were lobbying over the years, till around, if you look at the nuclear, the basic plans over the years, in fact, after 2010, the next basic energy plan was supposed to come in 2013, but then it did not come out in 2013 just because there was this huge discussion and I mean going on in the Japanese I mean media as well as among the politicians here as to what to do with nuclear. I mean, so that is why there was a huge I mean, there was a delay for the basic energy plan to be coming out, and this was again of course Japan since 1950s had been investing heavily on this nuclear sector, and all of a sudden to come out of it was a big decision. And I mean, there are a lot of it's a huge decision in the sense that what happens with all the the private companies and the people who are working in all this in this sector, so it was a huge decision to be taken. So anyway, the point is these people were prevailing until the latter part of the second part of the last decade. But then with the global consensus for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, again nuclear energy was pushed not only just in Japan but all over the world. This is now the consensus is that we have to go for the nuclear energy also should be there in the portfolio of the countries for attaining carbon neutrality. So all these debates further sort of concretized the current Japanese government's plan. So it was it's not just one incident which had happened. I mean, over the years, that's why I was trying to show you the various international agreements which had come out over the years, like climate change and even the G7 communiques. All of those were trying to highlight, even the International Energy Association, I mean Energy Agency, that also was trying to show the problems related to over dependence of the fossil fuels and then what it causes for what its role for excess greenhouse gas emissions. So there was a consensus all through this last 10 to 12, 13 odd years towards pushing reintroducing nuclear, and then Japan just went along with that. There was a the business people, the Keidanren, for example, they were all against the ban, but then finally they could get this international sort of flow. I mean, they went along with this international flow to reintroduce nuclear in Japan. Yeah, towards the question of I mean, Farah had just asked me about the nuclear. So if I may show you the slide, the first slide. Can you see the slides? Is the slides visible?
No.
Okay. I mean, so basically to say that,
reshare in case you want to use the.
Yeah, I could just the third slide, in fact, if you could share that.
Okay, sir. Wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Yeah, I could do it. So if you look at your question was about how it changed, right? So if this is like before Fukushima 2010, 2011 is when the Fukushima disaster had happened, and further the nuclear shutdowns. So there were like 54 reactors in Japan, running reactors at that time, and all of them were shut down within a span of around 4 months after the disaster. And there was a brief time in which a couple of the reactors was restarted, but then again there was a huge outcry against the restarts, and it again was shut down. So if you look at 2010, the nuclear is around 11% of the Japan's forms around 11% of Japan's primary energy supply. But currently, if you look, it's around 6 to 7%. So over the years, like say in 2015, they restarted the reactors. one by one after, of course, the nuclear regulatory authorities approval. And all of those reactors one by one had to be have to submit an application towards a nuclear regulatory authority, and then they will go for a rigorous test, and if they are still matching to their specifications, only then the nuclear regulatory authority will give a approval. And then so right now like around 12 reactors have been restarted, and so over the years from 2015 onwards, the percentage has improved as in like increased. Now it's standing around 7%. But then whether it will reach the 20 to 22% of the rates that basic energy plan is calling out for, it is a big question, because most of the reactors are out of the 54, let me just, that's right. Yeah, see, if you look at the current situation, around only 12 reactors are restarted, and there are 8 plus 7 plus 6, so that is like 10, around 21 reactors are to be decommissioned. So out of 54, 21 is to be decommissioned, and already another 3, the last Tokai Daiichi and Hamaoka 1, so another 4. So out of 21 plus 4, and so 25 reactors are to be decommissioned. So 54 minus 25 is how much? 29 reactors could be restarted technically. But out of that, again, by the time it gets approval for the from the NRA, there are some which will be which would have crossed the year for the 40-year mark. It would have crossed the 40-year mark, and so my point is that all the reactors would not be able to be restarted. So that even with that, you can't reach the 22% of the energy supply. I mean the power supply. It won't meet the nuclear won't meet the 22% of the targets. So that's a big question. So towards that, now Japanese government is, as I hinted earlier, is coming out with this small and medium reactor program, which the first, this even a single of that reactors is not yet made commercially viable as yet. The first one is supposed to be coming in the US around in 2026 or 2027. So the existing nuclear reactor, the places where the reactors were there, once they are decommissioned, the government is planning to bring rebuilt reactors there in these existing lands. So you don't need to go for a further in search of another land. So the existing lands would be, which were reactors were there earlier, would be continued to be used for to build a new nuclear reactor. So that's the way it is going now. And your question about fossil fuels, of course, when all the reactors were shut down in 2011, the deficit was taken up by firing thermal power stations using coal and LNG, and that increased the the carbon intensity of the economy in 2013. So it peaked, from 2011 onwards, when they started firing the thermal power stations. The carbon, by 2013, the carbon intensity peaked, and that is why in the Paris negotiations, when the greenhouse gas emission reductions were, Japan submitted its NDCs. So 2013 was a peak, and from then on, that was the base year from which they had put for reduction. So there was a huge outcry within the civil society agencies here, which is concentrated, which is proponents of decarbonization and reducing greenhouse gas emissions here in Japan. They were saying that 2013 was a peak. So what is the point in keeping that as a base year? That rather Japan should have kept probably the Kyoto Protocol year maybe as the baseline from where to start. So my point, the larger point is that 2013 the energy intensity, the carbon intensity peaked, and that was again from the uptake of the fossil fuels. And now if you look at from 2013 onwards, the greenhouse gas emissions, Japan was going through reductions, around for the last 7 years. There was a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, but just in the 2-3 months back, there was the latest greenhouse gas emission rates which have come up for last year. In that, the first time in the last 8 years, there's a uptake. So that uptake is again due to revival of the economy after the pandemic. New businesses have started. Manufacturing has improved. Increased. Energy consumption has increased. So all of this, and plus with the fact that with the Ukraine war happening, because of the shortages, more coal fire, thermal power stations and even LNG ones had to be, which was earlier slated for, to stoppage, because of greenhouse gas commitments, reduction commitments. So these things have again increased the, the fossil fuel, percentage-wise. If you look, it is though it had gone down, it has come up in between, and then again it's gone down for, just before 2021, around the Ukraine war and all, and then again now it's going up. That's what I would say. Thank you.
So we have a raised hand from Mr. Rappai. Sir, could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. First of all, congratulations, Peter.
Yeah, thank you.
You've done a good job. Of course, I think too much of nuclear, but I will not ask about the nuclear. Can you explain 2-3 things? Because one is what the Japan is doing about the transmission losses, improving that. Second, about the wind energy. Can India join or learn from them, or is there some companies looking at that area? I think because a lot of wind energy, we haven't used our potentials. And in the Japan, how good they are making all this windmills and that large fans and all that. I don't think they import it, but if you can briefly tell us. Thank you.
Yeah. Regarding transmission, that is a big challenge here in Japan. As I said earlier, Japan has got 2 regions where especially in the west, like beyond Tokyo towards Hokkaido, and beyond.
But I think they are standardizing that pattern.
Not really. There is this. So basically, this frequency difference in both these regions. There is a particular place, I forgot the name, wherein these 2 are being, like streamlined, but the point is that's a major problem, so that is one. And the other issue is with the, all the, for example, Tokyo region, like Kansai, and all the, businesses are more, the power demand is more here in this region. So where do you get the power from for this region? It's like that is where, Fukushima comes, though it's like in an outlying region. And then the Kashiwazaki Kariwa plant, which is the largest, agglomeration of nuclear reactors in one particular spot. that is in Niigata Prefecture. So from all of these places, electricity generated in these nuclear, reactors are being transmitted towards Japan. Towards Tokyo region. So beyond that, if supposing more nuclear reactors or some energy sources there in Hokkaido, like to bring it to Tokyo region, it needs a lot of infrastructure. Needs to be updated. So right now the talk is going on about laying underground, not underground, undersea cables between Hokkaido towards the consumption centers here in Tokyo or in other parts of Tohoku, or even from Kyushu, where there is excess renewable energy power, which could be generated from there to towards the consumption centers here in central Japan. So this is again as part of the GX transformation project. These projects are being discussed. But then, this is just in discussion phase. The people are still, no concrete plan has come out as such. This is regarding the transmission sector. And then regarding wind power, as I said, in 2021, the first wind, vision, the wind power vision for 2030, something of that sort is the name. I forget the name exactly, the nomenclature exactly. But then this was the 2020 vision. According to the 2020 vision, wind power vision, every year 1 gigawatt of power has to be generated to be added from wind power, that too mostly offshore wind. And but then, as far as technology is concerned, mostly at least the initial part, it was coming out from Japan is sourcing it from Denmark. So there's this company called Vestas, I guess. Vestas is from where Japanese companies were getting the technology, but Mitsubishi is also involved in it. Like, for example, in the first auction of this offshore regions, which was called for in 2021, late 2021, it was Mitsubishi Industries who had got the largest chunk of the area where those offshore wind mills had to be supplied. So in Akita Prefecture and near Tokyo, Chiba Prefecture, in all these offshore regions, it's Mitsubishi. So basically, Mitsubishi is coming out with this huge installation. So, but then I'm not quite sure how much of that technology is fully coming from Japan. Of course, Vestas is there initially, so they might be indigenizing this technology over the years. And if even just beyond Fukushima, where the power, the nuclear reactor was there, beyond that in the sea, they had actually come out with a offshore wind project. This is like in 2015. So it's not that Japan doesn't have the technology. Probably it's just in its initial phase of kind of making it for mass production. I mean, Vestas is there, so I understand they should be having some technology transfer or even collaboration happening. Thank you.
So we have a raised hand from Dr. Krishnan. So I request you to please unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Joy. It's really wonderful to see you.
Oh, yeah.
On time. So congratulations, first of all, for your defense and finally becoming a proper PhD holder. So congrats on that. And hope you are having a good time in Japan. So my question is basically from your presentation, what one can gather, it seems that every other renewable source of energy is facing issues in Japan. So it looks like there is a lot of cons rather than more pros for all of those renewable energy options. which is also one of the reasons why Japan is going back, or is very kind of adamant on continuing with nuclear energy, even though you're talking about decommissioning plants and all that, but still nuclear energy remains the, if not the front and center, but definitely the focus area. So if that is being so, I'm just also wondering, post Fukushima, is Japan looking at all nuclear technology as only indigenous, or is there more collaboration in that sector which Japan is looking forward to or is welcoming? And a follow-up to that particular aspect is, in terms of international collaboration, is also because Japan is now a very significant member of Quad, is Quad itself looking at these options of nuclear energy or civilian nuclear energy into its agenda? And if so, is Japan able to use Quad for this nuclear collaboration? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. See, so in fact, soon after the, the 1974, the oil crisis, Japan had come out with, plans to rather develop, mostly solar technology at that time, and in fact, it was quite successful in the next 10 years or so. But then it fell short of implementing the plan, the solar projects at that time, But then by 20, between 2000 and 2010, there were a couple of companies who were very, they were the leaders in solar PV all over the world. In fact, Kyocera is one name that comes to my mind. But then the last 10 years or so, 10 to 15 years, China has taken the lead, and all these companies had gone down, the Japanese companies. But then in, with the, the feed-in tariff system and the RPS, which I mentioned earlier, the Japanese government is giving a huge impetus towards solar, So in fact, RPS was introduced in 2003, and FIT was fully implemented in 2012. These two plants, the more impetus was given towards the development of solar power plants in Japan. So with that, if I may show you this slide, you can see that there was a 22% year-on-year average, increase in solar photovoltaics alone. So, the larger point that I would want to put across is that, a lot of solar projects were sanctioned in Japan, like, they call it as mega solar here, like huge, they're like, Japan, like 10, 20 years back, there were a lot of golf courses here in Japan, but now with the, the interest in golf waning out, all of these golf, courses are lying vacant, and most of them are now being converted to solar, mega solar installation facilities. So with that, in the last 10 years, huge increase in projects, and that's why you can see before that, Fukushima, only less than 5% was coming from renewables, but then that has come to around 22% and more. So the large intake of solar is one area, which is one thing which has happened after Fukushima. But then geothermal, it's a nascent technology. It's there, the technology is there, but then there are a lot of problems. There were one or two pilot, power projects in geothermal run before, even like 20, 30 years back itself, 20 years back at least. I'd been to one of those, it's a region called Hachimanta in Tohoku region. But they had stopped it seems. But then with the new technological innovations happening, they are starting another three. In 3 more regions, new geothermal plants have been set up. But again, as I said, there's a lot of opposition towards it because of the environmental problems associated with it, and this is also applicable to even solar PV installation, mega solar PV installation. So all in all, there is a increase in renewables. But then again, regarding the question about nuclear, I mean, you are talking about collaborations, right? So basically, Japanese companies, I mean, as Shamshad also had mentioned earlier, France is the #1 country where, like, where the maximum number of reactors are still running, and second was Japan until Fukushima had happened. But then Japanese technology is mostly, quite from the US. So it's like, the pressurized water reactor and the PWR and the other form, both are from the American side, So, but then over the years, since the 1980s, in America, because of environmental issues and whatnot, and of course with the higher costs associated with American reactors, the industry had gone down. But in Japan, they had, as Shamshad earlier mentioned, the nuclear village had somehow was successful in continuing with this in Japan. So the technology is American mostly, and even the Japanese companies, Mitsubishi, Toshiba, and Hitachi. These three are the main three, major companies who were big in this industry, in the nuclear industry. They had acquired their companies with which they had collaboration earlier from the US. So that's the sort of situation which has happened. And in terms of international collaboration, I mean, for example, Abe, when he came, when he was elected, he was pushing for international, nuclear exports, reactor exports from Japan. So with, I guess, I mean, it was Turkey with whom there was considerable progress which was happening. But then even this is like in 2021, I guess, that project also did not take off. So basically, since Fukushima had happened, Japanese government has not had any collaboration with any other countries which is looking out for nuclear in their energy portfolio. But then with regard to there are some technologies in which Japan was trying to develop since the 70s and 80s onwards, but then many of them had run into trouble. But one technology it's called it's a helium. I just had hinted on it just before. So the HTTR it is called, the High Temperature Engineering Test Reactor. It's again a project which was being developed in Ibaraki Prefecture, that is like north of Tokyo. So this particular technology, I mean, though the reactor was up and running, it had gone into trouble with with some security issues, as well as with Fukushima. Post Fukushima, these projects were all shut down. But with renewed interest in UK, for example, UK also had come out. I mean, in fact, had plans to stop its dependence on nuclear in the 1990s, and there is a revival which is happening in UK. So in 2008 onwards, they had come out with a new plan to start, nuclear reactors there in Japan. I mean, in UK, and so some of these Japanese companies were initially having tie-ups there with projects there to sort of build. But then again, with China coming into the picture and with cost escalation, so all of those projects had gone. I mean, they have been taken down. And recently, this particular new technology, which Japan is trying to, which had in fact pioneered here in Japan, is now being talked about much in the UK, and now they are in collaboration with this particular facility in Japan. So, and then of course the SMRs are one where Japan is trying to tie up with with TerraPower, the Bill Gates funded company.
No,
So,
Joy, sorry to interrupt. I'm actually also asking about not just Japan exporting, but also is there a possibility of Japan importing, especially post Fukushima and now with the Quad, importing any of technology or R&D or know-how or any other aspect of the technology itself? It's not just export, but also
I mean, importing, SMR would be one area from where Japan would be it would be keenly looking upon, because the other, Japan is the pioneer, in the other sectors. So, and then of course the fusion reactor, which is the ITER, it is called, which is happening which is being developed in France. The Japan is also a partner with that, along with India. So that is one which is coming to my mind. And of course, then decommissioning is one. This is not exactly reactor related to reactor technology as such, but decommissioning of the nuclear sites. Like, for example, UK, as I said earlier, there was a lot of, in UK, along with the US, was one of the pioneers initially the nuclear energy technology in the in the civilian nuclear technology before, and with the one of the earliest reactors were all in these places like UK and US. So when the reactor lives are over in these places, they have already sort of decommissioned some of the reactors there, and so UK is considered as a pioneer in that field. So there's a lot of collaboration which is happening between the UK and Japan. For example, even for Fukushima decommissioning, also there's a lot of technological assistance that Japan had taken from the UK. Yeah, that would be my answer, I guess. Hope I could answer it.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
So we have two more questions in the chat box. The first is by Snigdha, who is a research assistant at the ICS. She asks, how is Japan engaging with its citizens and communities to raise awareness and drive participation in carbon reduction initiatives? And the second question is by Shubhangi, who is a master's student in PSIR at the Central University of South Bihar. She asks, in your opinion, can a perfect balance between economic growth and environment sustainability be achieved in today's world with growing population and their growing demands? Additionally, what should be the approach of the Indian government regarding nuclear energy in a long run, considering the geopolitics of uranium?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, the question about citizens and communities, how are they going with the Japanese government's plans for what is it, decarbonization? What is it? What was it? Could you repeat that?
Certainly, sir. So she's asking, how is Japan engaging with its citizens and communities to raise awareness and drive participation in carbon reduction initiatives?
Oh, carbon reduction initiatives, yeah. So, I mean, see, over the years, Kyoto Protocol, Japan was a place it had come up, So since then, there's huge lot of awareness within Japan towards causes on carbon reduction and other environmental issues. I mean, see, if you look at cities, for example, Tokyo had, I mean, see, the Japanese government has just now come out with the ETS, the emission trading system for the whole country, or even a carbon reduction plans for the whole country. But then for even Tokyo government itself had initiated plans by itself. Like, I'm just saying, just not just Tokyo, but then there are other cities also. But then I'm just talking about Tokyo, since I know a little bit about it. Since 2012 onwards, there were concrete plans the government had come out here. I mean, it's a larger question, like how does it raise awareness among the citizens? I mean, in the media, you talk like any program in TV these days, it's all about SDGs, I mean, I mean, that's a big catchword here. I don't know how far it is that prevalent in India, but then, like, in universities or in any platforms, there will be something SDGs, it's become a kind of a catchword here. So media is there, then city initiatives like villages, and then the larger programs which are run by the central government, wherein citizens are also asked to participate. I mean, so it is there. I'm not quite, I cannot say anything specific about it. And the demand and supply with regard, so as far as uranium is concerned, so see, Japan was was planning earlier, to use I mean, the existing, I mean, the enriched uranium usually is supplied from the United States. And then once this uranium is depleted, like after running in the reactors, they had developed, or rather plans to make mixed oxide fuels out of it, with the depleted, the uranium, the rods, which are once they are taken out. So they will be run through reprocessing plants, and whatever leftover of uranium or plutonium, would be taken out from there, and then it will be mixed with other metals to make a new sort of fuel called MOX fuels. They call it MOX fuel. So, so the plan was to run, develop reactors which can use such fuels. So, there were two of that, like, which was planned, since the 1970s, in fact. And one had went into serious trouble with regard to the, it was using sodium as a the chemical sodium as a medium to instead of water in the pressurized water reactors or the LWRs. So there was a huge, I mean, there was a serious case of sodium leakage in the 1990s, and then since then that particular reactor was shut down. So that project was huge, and it did not take off the way in which the Japanese government wanted. So, so that is what I mean. So from the existing uranium, enriched uranium stock that they have, they were trying to basically looking out for a full fuel cycle. So that project did not happen. So yeah, I mean, but then they claim that the technology is there. Only thing, because of the leakage, the plant had to be stopped. So probably if this whole plan, which is just recently announced of this GX transformation, goes ahead, they will revive that plant too. In fact, the plant was initially supposed to be decommissioned. It was in 2017, I guess this was planned, but then it's still not been implemented, it seems. So there is a talk of that plan to be again revamped again happening. So yeah, that would be my answer. Thank you.
So we have no further questions in the chat box. I now invite the chair for his concluding remarks.
Okay, I must sincerely thank Peter for giving a comprehensive understanding of Japan's post-Fukushima nuclear strategy. three points I want to make before I conclude. One is about Japan regaining these same percentage or same share of nuclear energy as it has around 23% before 2011. This seems unlikely because of the deep revulsion among the society against the nuclear reactor, because they believe that nuclear reactors are the living nuclear bombs on this Japanese archipelago. As Peter was pointing out, some of the nuclear reactors had to be decommissioned because new regulatory authorities found that, including Hamaoka, found that they are standing on the seismic fault line. So when a nuclear plant is sitting atop the seismic fault line, it won't be good to restart it. So and Japan being being a country which has lots of seismic fault lines, it is very difficult to again invest that heavily in the nuclear sector. So we will not see the revival of nuclear sector in Japan for sure as of now. That's what my my opinion is. And there was a question about the finding a balance between the growth, economic growth. I think from one of the participant.
Yeah, I did not answer that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so that has not that has gone unanswered. But I think it is up to the society. It has to find a balance, and I think it can find a balance. It will not retard the economic progress or the GDP growth, provided that we utilize green technology, which there are so many green technology emerging. Now we can employ those technology in constructing our houses, and then a little bit compromise we have to make in our energy consumption pattern. So if we try these two things, we can still achieve the decarbonization and the progress can continue. So regarding the export of nuclear technology, this question I think was asked. Japan has pushed strongly to export its nuclear reactors, but considering the cost effectiveness of its technology, your Peter is right. It was Turkey who has taken the technology, but other countries, let's say United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, it is the Korean companies which has won the bid. So it's not because of the Fukushima or the nuclear Japan's nuclear reactors are not that, what do you say, proof, or like it is not that efficient. It is because the construction cost which the Koreans are offering, it is going to the Korean companies rather than the Japanese companies. However, Japan will continue to manufacture it, considering it has won the bid to install nuclear technology plants, nuclear plants in India. So that will continue. Thank you all the participants for joining today's presentation by Peter. I would like to wind up here. Thank you very much.
So with your permission, shall we bring today's proceedings to a close?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. With this, we shall wrap today's session. We thank Mr. Hudson and Dr. Khan for gracing today's session with their presence and for giving us their precious time. The video of today's discussion shall be available on the ICS's YouTube channel. At the ICS, we conduct seminars every Wednesday, and information regarding the same is available on the ICS website. Alternatively, you may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you so much.